music is.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you all for coming. My name is Reem Saleh, and I'm the Associate Director of External Relations and Partnerships at the Art Center here at NYU Abu Dhabi. The Art Chat is part of our virtual Off the Stage series, which also includes community dinners, visits to NYUAD classes, and post-shows Q&As. Even though we're not able to meet in person, unfortunately, we still want to bring the artists to our community. To make sure you don't miss out on anything, subscribe to our newsletter or check out the Off the Stage tab on our website. I want to thank the artist, Eric Sand, for taking the time to chat with us this evening. And I also want to thank the Career Development Center at NYU Abu Dhabi for partnering with us. As a reminder, this arts chat will be recorded, as you noticed, for social media and internal archiving purposes. Now, please welcome Sri, third-year NYU AD student, and Eric San, AKA Kid Koala.
Awesome. Hey, Eric.
Hello.
We've kind of in this room, but to start things off, thank you so much. It's glad to have you back as part of the NYU Abu Dhabi community as a whole and beyond. Again, like I said, I'd been able to see your work with Nufonia Must Fall when it came here in 2017. It was really nice to have everything that you did, both in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, where I'm from. You'd come over to Brunswick. So, and since then, I've gotten one turntable and I've been messing around with it. So,
Awesome.
So yeah, you've been inspirational to say the least for me personally. So yeah, thank you. To start things off, I wanna do this thing called a rapid fire, where I basically say a few words, and you say the first thing that comes to your mind. Is that cool?
Okay. I don't know how rapid I'll be.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm not timing you. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, first word is fire.
Fire. Scary.
Water.
Necessary.
Cars.
Like cousin?
No, like cars.
Oh, cars.
Mm.
Electric.
Yes. Music.
Music. Also necessary.
Koala.
Koala. Syphilis.
Oof.
Apparently, a lot of them are dying of syphilis. That's yeah. I don't personally have syphilis.
Yeah.
For the record, but
okay, just so everyone knows. Children.
Children. The future.
2020.
Special year.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm gonna. That's good. I just wanted to start things off. Again, like the question. So sort of where are you right now? How have you been? And like, with 2020, how have you been coping during the pandemic in general?
It's been a lot of time at home. Obviously, I normally spend half the year on the road, but the upside of that, it's more time with my family, and also being able to dive into projects that require me to be here and sort of in a focused space for a longer period of time. So it's been that. We haven't been socializing, and we don't really leave the building much. But It's been different for sure.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I know this point, like these kind of talks like tend to start off and we go into like, you know, the artistic process right now. And in attempt, I want to get back to that in a bit. But like going back to that rapid fire, as far as you can remember, I'm curious what comes to your mind when I say the word fun in childhood. It doesn't have to be like a word, like the rapid fire was, just what comes to your mind when you think of childhood and fun?
Freedom. I think
Mhm.
I think that's the free spirit. I think of childhood. When I think back to my childhood,
Mhm.
I didn't know what stakes were. I didn't. When you're a child, you don't really have that idea of um, necessarily when you're in a state of play, the consequences of that. You just sort of play and you discover things, and that's part of the fun part.
Mhm.
Um, I think as you get older, sometimes you're a little more cautious actually about trying new things, like picking up a new instrument or trying a new sport. And
Mhm.
I think when you're in childhood, it's almost like everything is a new adventure. You know,
Mhm.
a skateboard, I want to try that. Pogo stick, I want to try it. I guess if you hit your 40s and 50s and you haven't tried a skateboard, you're gonna start wondering whether that's for you or whether this is the time to start. But I think that free spiritedness in childhood
Mhm.
is a special thing. I try to hang on to that for the most part, and I think that's probably why I like to work on projects where I'm actually outside of my comfort zone
Mhm.
80% of the time, because it keeps me in that state of focus and sort of having the antenna up for new experiences and see what I can learn.
Mhm. For sure. Um, yeah,
There's
that's great.
construction today. Can you hear that construction?
No, we're actually good, at least on my side.
Okay, all right. If not, if it gets bad, I will put in this headset. But for now,
Yeah, no, Zoom has a surprisingly like good noise cancellation thing, so I think we're good. um,
okay.
um, but I mean, like that's good to know. And like the thing I'm trying to, so the thing I was curious about is that like whether it's in your comics, the cardboard robots, children in the child mind like seem to be incorporated, right? So like I like that's what I was trying to figure out, and like you've told me already a good amount of that, but I was curious how is it this child spirit, that direction that you're trying to incorporate with your work, or is that something that just came in? When does this idea of like children come in?
I mean, I don't. There's certain crafts like scratching that I've been doing for literally decades, and some
Mhm.
might say, okay, well, that's your profession, that's your instrument and stuff. But even there, I would say that I still feel like I'm very much um, in the naive stage of discovering that instrument. Even though I've been scratching for 30 years, all I need to do is look at some footage of Thelonious Monk on the piano, or listen to Billie Holiday sing, and
Mhm.
how she's able to bend all her notes with so much nuance to realize that, oh, okay, I'm not there on my instrument. Yeah, I've been doing it for decades, most of my life, but I still can see that there's so much more to learn and there's so much more to dig into there. And so I think that's my attitude towards most of the work is to try things that are not necessarily new to the universe, but just new to my experience, and then take what I've learned over the years and try to apply it to the next project, and see what else I can learn and how I can expand on that. For me, the turntable is the part that kind of connects all those dots. That music and that through line and that attitude of scratch DJing
Mhm.
is is very central to that ethos through all the work, whether it's a theater production, a film, an animated thing, a video game. Um, the idea of scratching, what drew me to the instrument in the first place, was that it was about that. There
Mhm.
weren't any real rules, except for the one thing that was encouraged was some level of self-expression, some way of twisting your own personality into the turntable at the time. And then as I apply that to other fields, you know, whether it's a live experience or theatrical production or film or video game, I still try to bring that core idea to it, you know. And it's a playful way. I think when you're playing with that idea, because a lot of the times, at least from my own experience, I don't know whether it's going to work. There's no precedent. Sometimes there's no track record for something that I'm studying. Oh, well, they did it this way, so, you know, let's do it that way. Sometimes I'm actually just deliberately swerving into some, you know, uncharted territory, but having fun with it. And then, you know, luckily for me, I found a crew and a team of artists that are also up for that type of adventure. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the crew, so like in Newphonia Must Fall, which again, we saw a performance in 2017 in NYU Abu Dhabi. You have many moving parts, right? There's the live cinema, there's the puppets, there's turntables, music.
Yeah.
So could you tell us more about your process in terms of like how you bring all of this together? Like I know that this is directed by KK Barrett, but like you just said, how do you like find or select or create your creative team? Like how does this happen in the studio? Maybe like we could even see some of your studio.
Yeah. Sure. Well, let's start with Newphonia. This is the book that started that project. This was something that I'd written in say the year 2000 to the year 2003. It was shortly after my first album was released, and in that album, Carpal Tunnel Syndrome, I had included I think a 36-page comic book, and I had done one news interview for the CBC here, the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, and they just flipped through the book, played a bit of the record, and it was a couple really quick, maybe a 2 to 5 minute bit on the news. And a week later, I get a call from a book publisher, and they said, "Hey, we saw your clip on the CBC News. We want to meet with you about a project." And so we went and it was my first sort of power lunch. There's the publisher, Robert Lecker, and Emma Mackay, and I was there with my manager and friend Rena, and they said, you know, we want to offer you a book deal. And I said, well, I'm a DJ. I don't write books, you know. And they said, yeah, but we think, you know, maybe you have a story you want to tell. And I said, okay. Well, I literally said, before I sign any contract with you guys, what is a book to you? You know, what am I actually signing on to do? And they said, 10,000 words, 100 pages, whatever topic you choose. And I said, okay. And I sort of sat down at my word processor. They gave me a bit of an advance to work on it. And I started typing into my word processor. I was in my 20s. I didn't really think I was an authority on anything, but if there was something that I did know on a day-to-day thing, it was being on the road. And so I started writing this kind of handbook for the touring DJ. Talk about niche market, right? There's only a few of us doing it. But I tell you, okay, this is how you do your laundry in the sink. This is, you know, the first thing you should do when you land in a city. A lot of the times I was traveling by myself, just me and my record bag. So I started typing this kind of touring DJ handbook, and I was boring myself to tears. I said, no one's going to read. This is not actually a necessary book. So instead, I went to my default activity, which was drawing. That's always what I've done since I was a child. And I started drawing all these characters, and eventually the robot in this story was one of the characters that came to life. And 3 years later, and many extended deadlines later, I turned in this book, as the manuscript, and knowing full well this isn't really what they asked for. I said, okay, well, instead of 100 pages, it's 350 pages, and instead of 10,000 words, as you can see, there are barely any words in here. It's almost like a screenplay to a silent movie. And so they read it and they said, you know what, we're not a graphic novel publisher, but we really love this book and we want to put it out. In fact, we see that there's this story theme where the robot in the story is trying to write love songs, even though he's tone deaf. And Emma Mackay, who is working at the publishers there, said, if we want to hear that music, do you think we could package it with some music? And so it was her idea to actually say, okay, why don't you do a little soundtrack for this book, and then we'll include it on a CD for those of you who know what that is. We'll put it in the book. And so that whole project was never anything I expected or planned on doing. You know, my main job was still making music, recording music, and touring, teaching clubs and music festivals. But it became something that did take a lot of time to complete, but it was a learning process, you know, and I enjoyed that process. So fast forward maybe 10, 13 years, and I meet up with KK Barrett, who's the director of Mufwani Must Fall Live. And we talked about working together. He was actually at a show of ours that we were doing called Vinyl Vaudeville. And we met after the show, and for those of you not familiar with KK Barrett's work, he's the production designer on films like Her, Where the Wild Things Are, Lost in Translation, Being John Malkovich, just a lot of my desert island classic films he's had a hand in making. So we talked about working together, and I didn't know what that would be. You know, I said, well, he said, how about we design some sort of visuals and that you can bring along on your DJ sets, because that's the type of show that you saw. And I said, okay, that's kind of interesting, but let's see if there's more way we can, like, a way we can bring more of his cinematic expertise into it, rather than it's just, okay, we're going to make some music videos that you screen while you're playing. And how do we bring that narrative in? So I sent him a copy of the book, not saying we should do this. I'm just saying we could do something a little more narrative. And I also do these kinds of comics and stuff on occasion. And he read it and he called me back and he said, let's do this live. I like this story. Let's do this. And originally we thought about doing it as a stage theater production with an actor in a 6-foot robot suit, and you know, and he had this whole idea sketched out, which is this 2-story apartment building that rotated, and it was amazing. And I said, oh, this is great. I love it. How much is that going to cost, you think? and he kind of gave me a ballpark number, and I said, dude, I'm in indie music scene. I don't really have that kind of dough. And we kept spitballing about how we could tell this story without just having some unobtainable budget. And that's when we decided to scale down to puppet scale. And then I'm going to share a little video here. This is the trailer for Mufwani, because I think that this is all very abstract for those of you tuning in, not knowing what we're talking about. So here is the trailer. Yeah, so that's a trailer from the show. As you can see, those I think we're at 8 cameras now. There's 70 puppets. There's 22 miniature sets. There's a team of 15 of us, including a string quartet and a team of puppeteers and cinematographers, and myself on piano and turntables. And we all kind of work together to create this show um, in one take every night on stage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, so kind of drowning back into that question even more, like I was curious, like another thing as part of that was like, um, with the rest of your team, like I said, with all those complex things happening, it you know, one side that like I've seen is when people like sometimes have, you know, you go through like an audition process or something like that where you put a call out, and then there's other spaces where it's very much like a collective, right? Like where it's like you've always been with me and obviously you're going to work on this project with me. In that kind of spectrum, where do you think your process?
Yeah, Newphonia was the first time I kind of delved more in a theatrical, soft theater production in terms of how the audience is engaged. I've done other shows that were starting to involve puppetry. Like for instance, here's one called Vinyl Vaudeville that sort of brought in this live element. And so I was meeting some people in the puppeteer scene from this show. This is actually the show that KK saw. So what I really liked about that, the live thing and integrating the puppets, was that we could create a spectacle that was sometimes more narrative based. That show was developed around an album called 12-Bit Blues, um, and a lot of it had to do with, well, a lot of it wasn't at a tempo that you could dance to. It was a lot of slow 6/8 stuff, and but instead of doing just up tempo dancey versions of the songs for the tour, I said let's keep that music in, you know, at the tempo that it is, but create a spectacle so people have something to enjoy, even though it might be a little more mid or low tempo. And so I had met the dancers, Adira Amram, and the Experience. They're a New York dance troupe, and we talked about how we could create a sort of playful show to present that. And for me, a lot of it is the context. But what I realized is okay, well, we're gonna do a song. One's a ska song, and one's a blues track, and one's more like a, you know, like a grimy club banger thing. But how do we create it so that every song has its own sort of on stage video almost, you know, but it's live. Every song is its own, you know, event or chapter in a like a vaudeville show. Mm-hmm. And so I really am from the live world. I really do like the idea that every night it can change, that we can adjust it, it can evolve, it can totally fall apart. Those types of things I really enjoy, the urgency of that. And so around the same time of that album, we did a video for one of the songs, 8-Bit Blues. I'll just play a clip of that for you, just to give you an idea. Because this, to me, is some of the seeds for the idea of playing, of trying something like Newphonia.
stopped the police and find out I couldn't wreck. They warned me up. They said, maybe.
So, I mean, just to give you a taste, that's sort of the idea. I literally had zero budget at that point to do a video, and all of a sudden the label said, "Do you have any videos?" No, so I just called up some friends, and the catalyst for that was these doodle track cars. So at first there were these toys that I'd seen at the toy shop when I was there with my daughter. You would draw a line, and then there was a car that would just follow that line. There's a little bit of a robot in there that's tracking the line. And I said, "Oh, that's crazy technology." It didn't make sense when I was a kid. And so I said, "Oh, well, is there a way we can use that, in a video somehow?" So yeah, we ripped the shell of the car off, and then instead put a little turntable. My friends Louisa and my wife Corinne Merrill, who they're both art directors and set designers. They made these miniature versions of the game, and everything's in. To me, it sort of brought the context to that song. Like even the chorus 312, which is Chicago's area code, 213 LA's area code. It was about just traveling back and forth. At the time, that's what I was doing a lot of, just kind of life on the road. But what I really enjoyed about that process was everybody was focused. It was one of those situations where the whole team was like all hands on deck, and eventually, even after a few rehearsals, we were able to create this kind of mini choreography just for that video, which we shot in one take, no edits. So I was really into that experience. At the end of it, we were thrilled, because it was synchronizing, artists, cinematographers, musicians, anybody we could get to join the club. That video was welcome, and so around the time of Newphonia, I had also met up with Adrian Fung, who was the cellist from the Afiara Quartet, and he had reached out and said, hey, I like your work. I want to do something that bridges that DJ world and chamber music. And Felix Guaver, who was one of our principal puppeteers on Newphonia, similarly, he said, hey, if you ever want to do a collaboration, puppetry and turntables, let me know. And then I met KK Barrett, where it was like, okay, yeah, you want to do something cinematic, but with the DJ world. And so I had, at this point, within the amount of maybe 4 months, met all of these co-conspirators. And instead of having 3 new projects, like separate, unique projects, I said, why don't we do one project that involves all of this stuff? Puppetry, chamber music, the cinema, film narrative, and you know, the turntable world, and that's sort of what led to me filming. So I didn't do any kind of audition thing. I wouldn't even know what I'd write on that audition sheet. We didn't know what we were gonna do. We didn't know what it was gonna turn out like or anything. But I think so once you have that collaborative team, everybody brings their sometimes decades worth of experience from their world into it. So we're all equally kind of out of our comfort zone, but we did have a lot of experience in our respective fields. And so when it was all brought together, we had a lot of fun figuring out how to utilize in a hybrid way what works about that, about your style.
For sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's great. No, I mean, like, and that's the whole thing, right? With this, like with this talk, we're also working with the CDC, which is our Career Development Center. Like, we have a bunch of people in college trying to figure out what we're gonna do with our life. So, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but like, also people, I can see questions coming in. So as you know, if you put them in the last 10 minutes, the wonderful people at the Art Center will be reading them out. So everyone, please do put in questions, as in when you have them. But yeah, so I have a bit of a cliched question, which is that like, is there like a moment or a series of events that you can look back to? It doesn't have to be a particular moment at any point that you started seeing that, like, what you do, because you said you'd been touring for most of, you were already touring when you were in your 20s, but is there like, when was it, do you think, like it became apparent, like, this is the thing that you're going to do? Was it early on, or did it just kind of organically happen? You were like, this is my thing.
Oh yeah, I still don't know whether I know this is a career talk, but I actually still don't know whether that's what I do qualifies as a career. I do know that for the last few decades, I continue to create work and continue to meet people and sort of push what I know how to do into sort of expand it into different lanes. But I think for me, it's still very much about that impetus to create something. It doesn't. I don't need a lot. You don't need to twist my arm to like do something fun and creative. I think I always have a few antennae up, looking for some way to integrate it into the story. So for instance, like that 8-Bit Blues video was very simply finding those doodle track cars. And the person was like, that thing rules. I love seeing it just follow a track. It's so bizarre, like eminently watchable to me. But how do we find a way to bring that into our story? So similarly here, I'll show you another video also done on zero budget from that era, and this is what we did for 5-Bit Blues. And to give you an example of what catalyzed this video, I had to create a video for 5-Bit for another song off the record, and we discovered these little Polaroid cameras, and so they were kind of popular at the time, and we figured out a way to time it correctly so that we could do our choreography just as we figured out the amount of time it would take for it to start, the exposure to start, and for it to be clear what you were seeing on the Polaroid. And so we decided to just, again, do this in one take with pretty much the same team. So here, I'll show you a bit of that. Anyways, I won't show the whole thing here because it's a kind of a slow-mo, but you get the idea that if you want to watch and see how that video ends, you can find it on our YouTube channel. But essentially, it was that. It was kind of the fun part of it to me was, okay, how do we use these Polaroids in a one-take situation? And when we started playing with it, realized that, oh, it really takes a long time, maybe 30 seconds before you start to see what's happening. So we mapped out the track and then we wrote a score to it that was preceded it by 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. So that, okay, we have to take a picture of the maracas 30 seconds before that happens in the song, type of thing, you know what I mean? And so and then also just that week, my friend Emma, who worked at that publishing company, said, "Hey, we're throwing out our old photocopier. Do you want it?" And I said, "Yeah, I want it." So all of a sudden I had the photocopy, and really it was that. It was one of those situations like, okay, we have a photocopy, we have the Polaroid camera. How are we gonna, create something that sort of fits the tempo and the vibe of that song. Mm-hmm. So that's all it takes. It's sometimes it's just that little thing. It's that little tool or that little spark that sends your head in that direction. Okay, I'm gonna make this about that. To give you an example, if I were to play a track from my first album. Sorry. Oh no, I don't have it. Okay, sorry. Scratch that. We're going back. I was gonna play a track from Fender Bender, but maybe I'll find it. Hold on. Now that I've started, I can't go back. So there was a track that I was working on my album, and I was having a bit of trouble with it in terms of, okay, well, I didn't know what direction this is gonna go, and then literally, I was in my apartment in Montreal, and it was a Sunday, and outside I heard this little traffic accident because it was a busy shopping street. It wasn't a dangerous. Nobody was hurt. It was just a bit of a fender bender, and then people were screaming at each other outside of their cars. And I kind of heard this through the glass, but it was just sort of just waking up like slam, people kind of going at it. And I walked up to the window and I realized, oh, this is kind of entertaining. I was just listening to it lying in bed and realizing, oh, I hope nobody's hurt. And then I walked up the window and was just kind of entertained by the folly, the human folly of it. And then I realized, like, oh, that track I was working on, I could make that about a fender bender incident. So it was really real life, actually, that inspired the theme for this track, something that happened in my actual life. So if I show you now, here, this is a video that we made for that. So that video was done by my cousin Monkmas, and we were both huge fans of David Lynch all through high school, like Twin Peaks. We just loved the kind of bizarre, the non sequitur type lines sometimes. And so I sent him that track, which if you just listen to it as an audio experience, you would hear the cars, you'd hear the people get out of their cars, you'd hear the police officers show up and like ask questions. What happened with these cars, you know? And but when I threw it to him, I passed the ball to him. I said, "Hey, Jay, make a video for that." And he showed me the storyboards where it was just completely psychedelic interpretation of it. I loved it even more. I said, "Yeah, let's go with this." You know, it ended up being, you know, so every time I think every time you have that idea and you take it as far as you can go and you pass it on or you collaborate on something and then you let it turn into its next incarnation, you're going to be surprised, or at least in my experience, just always very surprised and excited about what happens. You know, so similarly with Newphony, I think, you know, I'd pretty much taken this story as far as it was going to go in my mind, and at one point, you know, when you have this new point of view on it from collaborators, you can turn it into something you couldn't even dream could be possible. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, like I have a bunch of questions left. I think I'm gonna put like my last couple questions, and then we'll go to the audience, and we'll have them read out. So your Instagram bio, it says, "Keep it weird, they'll get it later," and I really like reading that, especially the word weird, with everything that we just talked about. I'm just curious what you mean by that, because you know, like the word weird comes up a lot in many kind of works, and it sometimes feel like like sometimes when people use it, it's just like, wait, are you just trying to use it as a cop out, or is it like, I'm curious what you take it as.
I think I've always been fascinated by the things that are left of center, and not just being weird for the sake of being weird, but just ideas that seem a little bit strange to me are kind of interesting, you know, whether they're musical production ideas or film ideas or story ideas. Like, those are the things that always kind of stay with me. If I were to, you know, give you a list of some of the movies that really inspired me when I was growing up, I would say most of those would easily fit in a weird category, you know, say Peter Jackson's Dead Alive, which was called Brain Dead in New Zealand. When I first saw that movie, I never knew a movie could be like that. And it pretty much kind of opened and shut a genre. And it was like, okay, it's a zombie movie, but it's a love story, but they really took it far out in terms of the execution of that idea, you know. Same thing with, you know, Charlie Chaplin's work and Jim Henson's work. A lot of that stuff that I'd never seen before, and at first you'd say, okay, well, that's kind of odd, isn't it? There's a frog singing a song, and a bear telling jokes, and then some pigs in space, and you know, all this stuff, which was strange to see on television or hear on records, but kind of made sense in its own universe. And over time, I when I started really digging into that work, or say the work of Monty Python or something, this was all the stuff that I was kind of growing up with. I realized that underneath it all, there was this playfulness. There was this almost a rebellious kind of attitude in their work, you know, in terms of, okay, well, here's the status quo and here's what's happening. And most people, here's the stuff that's making tons of money, so everyone's going and doing that. But then there are these crews that were just doing other stuff. And that was the stuff that was surprising me and getting me really excited about, you know, working in art.
For sure. And I'm curious, like, so what you just mentioned, right? Like the whole idea of like status quo, and a lot of the work that like revolved around this idea of being weird used to be about breaking that status quo, right? But bring that into the now. I'm curious how well, one, I'm curious about like if there's anything you can tell us about what you're working on right now, in general, but also like how that has changed. Like what do you has the idea of weird changed for you in now? Like in that, like, yeah, has it? But also, yeah, like what you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, again, when I if you watch that video for Fender Bender, I can connect the dots back to a very specific real life moment, um, that inspired that track, which then inspired this video. And so to me, it's not so much weird, like, oh, we have to create something that's so fantastic and bizarre. It can actually come from a real life experience. But then in the practice of turning it into something for people to watch or listen to, that's where you have that freedom, you know, to sort of find a new way to tell that story. So I think a lot when I look at the work, you know, you can say a track like Fender Bender, well, that's weird. There's no chorus. I can't dance to it. You know, what kind of record are you trying to make here? And I said, well, it's not, well, I'm not making a dance record. I'm not making a pop record. I'm making this other kind of listening experience that was more narrative based. And I think that was sort of the challenge to me, especially on my first record, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary now. I listen to it now. I had to listen to it recently just to do this post about it, but I would say, yeah, it's held up over time as it's still weird. Like, it was weird when it came out. It confused a lot of people, and it's still that. So I'm not patting myself on the back for like, yeah, weird forever. But I think the idea of it for me was like, it's when I listen to it, I actually hear a very personal record. Now, when normally you think about personal music, you say, okay, well, somebody writes a poem, they find some chords, and they sing over it, and it's just like bleeding out right into your eardrum. But to me, the problem, not the problem, but the creative restriction I had was I was a scratch DJ. So I was trying to tell a story about how my point of view at the time, in a way where that resonated with me and how I was really feeling. But having to do that by Frankensteining little clips of audio or little bits of spoken word and trying to create new sentences to say what I wanted to say, because at the time, like, my voice was through the turntable, you know, and that was a very fun, creative process for me. But I listen to that record now and I actually can bring myself mentally and emotionally back to those years of my 20s and the struggles that I was feeling, you know, some of the internal struggles that I was working with at the time that I was trying to get out through music. You know? Similarly, like Euphonia Must Fall, the word itself, Euphonia, is backwards for no fun. And Euphonia is a place where people don't have any fun. That would be like a real surface idea of the description of that word, but it could also mean like an internal struggle. Like, you could be the cause of your own euphonia. So the idea of getting past that creative block, or whatever you want to call it, it's been called a lot of things. That when you're actually able to like get around, circumvent that, or go through it, and then find that way to express yourself at the end of it, that's what the reward is, you know. And so I think the structure and the tools and the genre of music, or the field of presentation that you're choosing, whether it's theater, film, video games, whatever, there's always certain rules. But then within those rules, there's like an infinite amount of ways you can still kind of tell your story through it. You know, I firmly believe that, and I don't necessarily think it needs to be strange or bizarre or like unprecedented. I think by naturally, just because of who everybody is and their experiences and their influences and what they've been exposed to in the arts or in the music will affect their output, you know. So for me, I came from a jazz family in terms, I didn't play jazz, born in Vancouver. That's really far from New Orleans, but my father would always listen to jazz music, you know. So to me, it's still the sound of like, oh, this is what you listen to at home. It feels like home to me. When I finally got to New Orleans on my travels, I went to see Preservation Hall. And my father said, hey, I noticed, you know, you're doing a lot of traveling now. If your travels ever get you to know Preservation Hall, in New Orleans, go check them out. You know, it was one of his fondest memories as a college kid traveling through the States. And so I went to see Preservation Hall, and I was just blown away in terms of like the musical level that they're playing their instruments. I was also blown away by the fact that there's this tiny 80-person room. Nobody had their phones up. There was no microphones or amplifiers, just people breathing into their instruments for the 80 people that were there, and then it's vanished. It was just so volatile, but so present at the same time. And I went to a bunch of different clubs, jazz clubs, during that trip, and everybody did a version of Basin Street Blues, which is a classic jazz song. And so when I was on the plane heading back to Montreal, I just had that song. It was like an earworm in my head. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start my new album with a turntable version of Basin Street Blues. So I'm going to play you a bit of that right now just to show you. So I made this all off turntables. Like I would find one long note on a trombone, cut it on a record, like an E flat, and then I would bend it, or one pluck of a bass, of an upright bass, and I would just sort of puzzle this whole thing together. And it ended up being this video, which is...
Right now, we're gonna get together and give you a tune that we have a lot of requests for. It's our version of
Awesome.
So my cousin Mugmas also did that video, and we put that out into the universe, just on YouTube. And about I think maybe 8 months or a year later, we'd already moved on with our lives and everything. We actually get a call from Preservation Hall, from Ben Jaffe, who's the musical director there.
Mm-hmm.
And so my manager, Rena, said, "Oh, you got a call from Preservation Hall." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Yeah, he wants to have a chat with you about something." And so I talked to Ben, and he said, "Hey, we saw your video for Basin Street Blues, and we love it. We really feel you've captured, the vibe and the essence of in your own way, but the vibe of New Orleans." And then it's like, I've only been to New Orleans once. I was fully, an imposter syndrome style, but he says, "No, I want to invite you down to the hall to play with the band." And I said, "What? You're Preservation Hall. You only play acoustic instruments. What's that got to do with turntables?" And they said, he said, "No, there's something in what you're doing that I feel, needs to be shared and communicated with New Orleans and the generations of musicians here." And so I was actually invited. We flew down there, and they started the set by screening that video, and then they actually took it from there where it ended and started playing over it, opening it up. I was literally crying. Ask her and my wife. She was just like, I was bawling. I couldn't believe it was happening. and then the thrill of just playing with them, like Charlie Gabriel, who's in his 80s and master clarinet, and just trading riffs. I feel like I've learned more about music performance in 32 bars of trading riffs with them on that stage than I had for the last 10 years DJing by myself. So the idea of bringing those opportunities to collaborate or communicate into the process, that for me it is literally some of the most memorable times of my life.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eric, awesome. That's been awesome for me. That's my time. So we are going to have to switch to the audiences now.
All right.
But thank you so much. And I hope you had a good time. I hope people watching in had a good time. I let people take over and read out the questions from the Art Center.
Sure.
Again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for that conversation. We have our first question.
Okay.
The first question comes from James Kelly. The question is, how do you incorporate your vinyl cutting lathe into your compositional process?
Right. So I'll show you. This is the studio walk around part, I guess. Here. Okay. The vinyl cutter is actually downstairs, and this cable won't reach all the way down there, unfortunately. But I'll show you. Oh, Corey. I hope this doesn't get too tangled. I do most of the recording. This is like my turntable station. That's the piano that I started playing. If you can see it under all that tech, that piano there.
Hey Eric, it seems like we're losing you.
4 years old.
Hey Eric,
And
hi.
I hated practicing back then. I really didn't. It's taken me some time to. Am I plugged in now?
You're kind of freezing, so we're losing you. Did we just? Oh, there. Okay, we can see you now. You were freezing, so we were losing you. Yeah, you were lagging.
So this is where I do most of the recording nowadays. When I first started DJing, it was more about finding the sounds on records and learning how to bend them into new things, new notes and melodies. But now what I often do is I create these custom plates. So on something like that, I have a lot of instruments and stuff in my studio, I would record those, and then I would go downstairs to the record cutter and cut essentially a scratch tool record for myself. So for instance, like to give you an idea, this is one. So it's all it is an omnichord through a distortion pedal, but I like that tone. And then once it's on the record, I can't do it and hold the computer at the same time, but you know, for instance, I could scratch, you could start combining that, bending it into other notes, but having that source, new source to work with has been kind of a great new world to explore for me from a production standpoint. And so I'll record things like drums, or, you know, I see there's a lot of keyboards or anything. You can record pots and pans, or, you know, go record some crickets in the field or whatever, and then cut it to vinyl. And then once it's on vinyl, it's sort of my ground zero, because that's the instrument that I spent most of my life on. So once it's there, then I know all the other things that I can do with it after that. I think hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you for the little tour. And I'm just gonna jump to the second question from Noor. And she asks, could you talk about the process of going from when the team is exploring, playing, discovering, to the formal presentation of it, especially about getting the tech resources and the funding?
Okay, so yeah, again, for me, it's really important that that state of play is central on a daily basis to the project. It doesn't even matter if what the end product is in terms of it being, you know, maybe it's a very heavy theme or a melancholic theme. I still think the process needs to be enjoyable. So I think if we're not laughing like at least every 20 minutes in the studio, then we're doing it wrong. And so I try to create a situation or a place where people feel free to goof around and try things. So regarding that, it is like that. I do know with my collaborators, like, again, they have decades of experience in their specific field, so I want to see what they can bring to the table, and then how that point of view will change your point of view, and how you have to adapt what you're doing to synchronize and harmonize with it. That's the fun part, you know. So I think when I think about even directing, I still like to keep it like, all right, there's a storyboard, there's stories, these are the characters, but let's play around with it, see what can happen, you know. And so sometimes a lot of the stuff happens in the scene just while you're performing it in rehearsal, or sometimes even on stage, like say with Euphonia or the Storyville Mosquito or a more recent production. We'll learn things at the performance and say, oh, that worked out really well. That joke landed way better, or this scene was way more intimate and better. We should keep that. Or this didn't work out too well. Let's try it a different way the next night at the show, and trying to keep that alive and organic, that process. Always moving, I think is imperative to me. Regarding the funding, yeah, some of these ideas are expensive in terms of, it took us a while it's more money than I had personally to throw into a project like Euphonia to get started. But what we did do for our premiere season there was find a few presenters who wanted to help commission the project. So that's actually how Storyville Mosquito was made possible with the help of NYU Abu Dhabi. They're our head commissioner here. So let me show you a clip from Storyville Mosquito. So this is our current production, which was produced. Wouldn't have been possible actually without the help of NYU Abu Dhabi. So, and a few other presenters. here. Wait, where'd it go? Here it goes. So that's just a clip from you know, our work process and at one of our rehearsals for that show. But regarding the tech, I mean, it's basically, I use what I had at the time. Sometimes it's your phone, sometimes it's whatever you can get a hold of. Like say for instance, in the case of the 8-bit blues and the 5-bit blues videos. But I think once you have an idea, trying to find the right team, and that also includes the presentation team and the production team, to realize it. That is a lot of work, and it takes a lot of teamwork to make it happen. And so I think the budget on one of those shows, I don't think any one organization would have been able to just throw all that money towards it. So that's why we kind of, you know, split it up. Okay, well, here's our budget, but these 3 or 4 presenters are able to put in this much each, and also have the premiere season. And from that, you know, start, you're able to at least have the seed money to follow through on the production and create it. And then after that premiere season, maybe it's opened up to other presenters and stuff. But I think, yeah, finding co-commissioners, if you're talking about a production like Euphonia or Storyville Mosquito that has a team of 15, there's 15 performers, there's maybe 30 performers in pre-production that were just building puppets and building sets and props and stuff like that. So it was a you know, a pretty full on for me, coming from a, you know, solo DJ music production world. It was a different scale of work, but I'm very grateful that I have had the opportunity to work with, you know, presenters and like Bill Bragan at NYUAD, and to enable this to happen. Otherwise, if they didn't take a chance on us, it just would have just stayed in the realm of an idea as opposed to something that becomes a reality.
Right, so we have our last question for the evening. And I'm so sorry if I mispronounce your name. The question comes from Sai Cheating, and he's asking, could you share how you and your teammates, after playing around, experimenting and brainstorming, come down to a consensus on what materials to keep and what to toss out, handling alternatively?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of trust with our team in terms of, I think on a core level, they know me from a personal level. They know what tone that I'm trying to go for in the show, and the feelings that we're trying to create. You know, there's, okay, we want everybody leaving the theater with that warm, fuzzy feeling. We want it to be an uplifting thing, even if we're gonna take the protagonist character and like do the works through it. But at the same time, a lot of it is testing it, trying it at shows. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes what you think is going to be like 1,000%, the audience is going to laugh at this moment, and they don't. It totally flatlines. Then that becomes the challenge. That actually becomes a fun activity for the team to see. It's like, okay, why isn't it working? Maybe we need to change the camera angle. Maybe we need to, you know, bump up the music button at that moment and sting it properly, and just to keep that conversation going. So in terms of what we keep, yeah, if it starts working and we really get a kick out of it, we'll keep it. But again, similarly, just like I don't want the crew to go into full autopilot after we've done the show, say for 80 performances, you know, there's an idea of it becoming almost all muscle memory. And that's when the presence isn't there. And when people start sensing that, then we just generally as a team will start trying to push ourselves further to make it more urgent, more exciting. So there's always, without a doubt, with shows like Newphonia and Story of a Mosquito, there's always something we're trying for the very first time that night, you know, and that keeps everybody like on their toes and focused too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. It was so great just to get a glimpse of your studio, your creative space. And thank you, Steve, for doing such a great job moderating the talk. We're going to end it right here because we've got a community dinner to go to with Kid Koala and Sam Green. So thank you all for joining us. I just want to remind you of our other 3 arts chats that are coming up. We've got the creative team of Real AD on the 28th of September. We've got 600 Highwaymen on the 12th of October. And Akash Odedra on the 16th of November. So please sign up on our website, nyuad-artcenter.org. And we hope to see you at the next Arts Chat. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
See you in a bit.
All right, we'll see you in a bit.
Okay, cool.